Hello everyone and welcome back to Game Easy Roll Good. Today we are continuing my sort of build a bard series. This is a series all about me just going through and kind of building a bard because I've never really gotten into playing bards. Whenever I've tried to build one just sort of in theory, I never really enjoyed it. I don't really like how narrow their spell list is. I just always had this really trouble getting into it. So I'm kind of challenging myself to really kind of go through staying with the bard, no multi-classing, look at the subclass, what is it trying to do, pick spells around that, and try to end up with a bard that I would actually consider playing. So that's what we're doing today. We previously did the College of Glamour. Today we're looking at the College of Dance. I'm going to be sticking with the ones that are currently released for the 2024 Player's Handbook. As new bard subclasses get released, I will probably consider doing it for them as well. If you like seeing what I'm doing with the bard and you want to see me do this with other spellcasters, probably more so with the ones that have to pick spells and don't get to just get access to any of their spells, like the druid or the cleric, because you can just pick any of their spells every day. But classes like the sorcerer, maybe even the wizard, if you want to see me do this to more classes, definitely let me know. We're not trying to be like the super most optimal. We're just trying to kind of build around a cohesive theme that works with that subclass. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Again, we're going to be starting with the species options that we might consider for the bard. So the College of Dance doesn't really synergize with the spell casting of the bard, much like the College of Glamour did with wanting to cast specifically enchantment and illusion spells, but it still does have a decent theme. College of Dance does get the ability to make an unarmed strike when they're using their bardic inspiration, either as an action, bonus action, or reaction. While it seems like the subclass is wanting you to do that to like deal damage, and you certainly could still use it that way if you wanted to, but the other option that this allows us is that we are making an unarmed strike, which means that we can also use the grapple and shove options. One thing that allows us to do is sort of grab our allies and move them into more advantageous positions. With grapples being a saving throw and the fact that we can choose to fail saving throws, it means we can do this with our allies, and releasing a grapple is purely free. We can drop that at any time, so it's not like they're going to remain grappled for any reason. I think there's a lot of cool things that we can do with that, and there's basically this real kind of strong general theme with the College of Dance that we can use these features to help our allies and ourselves maneuver around the battlefield a little bit better. So what kind of species can help us with that? So first we can maybe look at the Aasimar. The Aasimar gives us a temporary flight speed once per long rest. Similarly, the Dragonborn gets a similar feature. The Goliath, they can increase their size, and when they increase their size, that also gives them an increase to their speed of 10 feet. Again, this is also only once per long rest. If we were really worried about flight speed, we'd probably want to pick like the Aarakocra, possibly even the Fairy, although the Fairy is specifically a small creature. So we might not actually want to pick the Fairy because, again, it is a small creature and we're going to be grappling a lot, so we want to probably at least be medium. The Spring Eladrin is in there. We mentioned the Eladrin for the Autumn Eladrin in our video for the Glamour Bard. The one that works very well for the College of Dance is the Spring Eladrin. This one allows you to, instead of sort of misty stepping using your face step, you can choose to instead essentially teleport one of your allies within 5 feet of you 30 feet instead. The Shifter has an option. One of their shape shifts allows them to have a temporary speed increase during the shift. You get that a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. The Tabaxi has the Feline Agility, where you can double your movement speed during a turn. You can't do that again until you spend at least one turn not moving at all. And from the lineages, the Dhampir, the sort of vampiric species, has the Spider Climb ability, which would technically allow us to like grapple and then pull them up onto a ceiling or a wall or something like that. I don't know that that's what we're really wanting to do on the College of Dance, but it is certainly an option. If I had to pick one of these, I would probably go for the Spring Eladrin. I think the face step, being able to touch an ally and teleport them 30 feet, I think is exactly the kind of thing that we were looking to do. I would say my runner-up would probably be the Tabaxi, because they get that feline agility to double their movement. This has the disadvantage of potentially putting us in range of other enemies. I could definitely see arguments for going with either one of these, but I think the Spring Eladrin, either being able to misty step ourselves or teleport another creature, that sort of flexibility I think is really great. So those are our species. Let's go ahead and move on to our ability scores. Again, we're assuming point buy as always. Again, we're not doing any sort of damage calculations. It's not that kind of video. So ability scores aren't super important, but it's still something we need to consider. Again, much like I did for the Glamour Bard and much like it's going to be for pretty much any bard, I don't know that there's any bard subclasses where I'd really make specifically really different choices unless I'm multi-classing. But we have the more dex focused bard, or we have the more con focused bard. Again, dexterity helps our armor class and our initiative and things like that as well. Constitution is going to help us concentrate on spells a little bit better. The Glamour Bard, we did focus on dex just because we don't have any other way to really increase our armor class, because the bard only gets light armor proficiency. But for the College of Dance, the College of Dance does get an unarmored AC calculation when it gets its subclass features, so dexterity is still equally as important, if not more important there. So for that reason, I would still stick with the sort of top ability score array here, and I'd keep my con at 14. We're really going to pick up that many concentration spells. We'll pick up a few for sure, but it's not really a big focus of what we're trying to do with this subclass. Then moving on from our ability scores to our possible backgrounds. Again, looking at the player's handbook, we have all the same background options that we did before. Again, we are wanting to focus on our charisma and our dexterity, so we are limited to the same subclasses that we did before. Well, I did say in the Glamour Bard video that I don't really like the entertainer background specifically on a bard because I feel it's just too on the nose. I think I kind of would pick it here just based on the strength of the musician feat. If I could get musician from any other source, I would definitely do that instead, along with being able to boost my dexterity and charisma. I would love to come up with any other possible background story about my bard, but at least for the College of Dance, it kind of makes sense to be an entertainer. Acrobatics is a decent skill. Again, we can use that to get out of certain restraints or even grapples if we don't have a face step available for whatever reason. Performance is good. We actually get advantage on performance checks as a dance bard as well, so that could come in use. I don't know what you would use that for specifically. I do know it comes as part of the influence action, which we talked about with the Glamour Bard, but yeah, we'll just stick with musician. In my last video, I did mention like the other backgrounds from like the Book of Many Things and the Bigby Presents Glory of Giants. While those could give us extra spells, there's no real spells on those lists that I'm really interested in, even as far as like Magic Initiate. So I'm perfectly fine with just sticking with Entertainer. A rare instance where I'm kind of just okay with one of the background options from the player's handbook. So let's go ahead and get started with our actual class levels and the spells that we're choosing. So starting at level 1, we're starting with our Starry Wisp and Minor Illusion again. Basically, again, the exact same cantrips that we chose on the Glamour Bard. I just think these are perfectly serviceable cantrips. I really like Minor Illusion a lot. We don't really plan on using a weapon, so we'll just skip True Strike, even though it's probably the technically higher damaging option. I do like having sort of Fairy Fire on a stick when it comes to Starry Wisp. For our first level spells, I'm not going to be shy about picking up healing spells on this bard. I'm also specifically going to choose Cure Wounds over Healing Word, mainly because I don't want there to be a situation where I want to use my Bardic Inspiration on the same turn that I want to heal. In those cases, I can use my Bardic Inspiration to do whatever I'm doing with that as a bonus action, then Cure Wounds as an action, and I'm not having to choose between one or the other when I want to do that. I've certainly played in parties with bards. I've seen that sort of conundrum come up where they want to do both on the same turn, but they can't, and I want to avoid being in those kinds of situations. Additionally, we'll pick up Longstrider, and Longstrider is just going to give us the ability to either increase our speed or our ally speed by 10 feet. It does upcast for additional targets. It lasts for like an hour, I believe. Again, we're just trying to focus on movement. This gives us a little extra movement. There's not a whole lot of spells we can get right now at this level. We'll pick up Thunder Wave just because, again, this seems like a subclass that is either going to be playing very close to melee range or sort of maybe at sort of like a mid-range. Either way, we're probably going to be at a range where enemies won't have trouble getting up to us. So if we don't have an easy way to get away from them, we can always Thunder Wave to push them away. And then finally, we'll also just take Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which I think is just a pretty serviceable control spell. Moving on to then level 2, we get our Expertise and our Jack of all trades. You can pick, Expertise in whatever you want, whatever skills you chose. We didn't really cover those because it doesn't really matter. For our other first level spell, again, we're going to pick up Featherfall. Again, it doesn't come up all the time. It is one of those spells that when you need it, you really need it. Or it can also just give you other options like to approach a particular encounter from, such as like dropping yourself into an encounter in order to like trigger surprise. Moving on then to our third level, this is when we get our subclass. First things first, we get our subclass feature, Dazzling Footwork. The benefits of this feature only work while we aren't wearing armor or wielding a shield. As a full class bard, we don't have proficiency in shields by default anyway. We do have proficiency with light armor, but we're not going to be using it. So it gives us Dance Virtuoso, where we have advantage on charisma performance checks when that involve us dancing. We get Unarmored Defense equal to 10 plus our dexterity plus our charisma modifier. That's basically as good as the Monk's Unarmored Defense because it focuses on their two main stats that they want to focus on, although I think it's slightly better in the sense that, the bard is able to play relatively more safely, being able to play a little bit at further range, whereas the monk wants to be up in melee range, and they might want to focus on their constitution a little bit more as well, so they might have to make some sacrifices. So I think this is probably one of the best unarmored defenses in the game. Then we also have Agile Strikes. It says when you expend a use of your Bardic Inspiration as part of an action, bonus, or reaction, you can make one unarmed strike as part of that action, bonus, or reaction. Again, so this is one of the big things that we're going to be trying to build around. Well, we can't really build around it, but we're going to be focusing on that for sure. And then the last feature here is Bardic Damage. We can use Dexterity instead of Strength when we make an unarmed strike. And when we deal damage with an unarmed strike, we can deal bludgeoning damage equal to a roll of the Bardic Inspiration die plus our Dexterity modifier instead of the normal damage, and that roll does not expend that die. So if we do choose to use our unarmed strikes to deal damage, which is certainly an option, we're not going to be focusing on that or trying to build around that at all. But in those cases where we do that, we can still deal some pretty decent damage as our Bardic Inspiration die continues to scale up. Moving on to our choices here, of course, we did get our Dazzling Footwork, so our AC is now being tracked here. We have now 16 AC, which is nice. That is almost as good as the Glamour Bard wearing like normal basic studded leather, and that's only 12 plus dex, so you end up with 17, and assuming that you don't have any like magic armor bonuses. So at level 3, we're almost as good as the max level Glamour Bard. We're going to give up Longstrider to pick up Kinetic Jaunt. This is a concentration spell that increases our speed by 10 feet and also makes it so that our movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. And we can also move through other creature spaces as if it was not difficult terrain. So this will help us a little bit as we're trying to move around the battlefield and kind of, maneuver our allies in place and get ourselves around the battlefield into safer places. And we'll also pick up the Enlarge Reduce. Again, one thing I noticed as I was initially going through this is that there aren't the spells that I would want to have for a build like this on the Bard spell list at least. So I'm kind of having to make do with what we have. I think there are situations where Enlarge and Reduce could come in handy. You could probably pick up any spell here. I just kind of like the Enlarge Reduce spell in general. Moving on then to level 4, we're going to get our first feat, and this time we're actually going to take Telekinetic. This is probably one of my favorite feats to pick up on any caster, and again, we're trying to move all of our allies around, so this works perfectly. We of course get the Mage Hand cantrip automatically through it. We also get that bonus action push or pull for 5 feet, and again, our allies can choose to fail the saving throw, so we can pull them 5 feet or push them 5 feet into a more advantageous space, or we can use that on enemies. If like they're near a ledge, we can pull them off the ledge or push them off the ledge, things like that. I've certainly done that in the past. Whole lot of fun. I really like the Telekinetic feat in general. We get another cantrip choice, of course, picking up Vicious Mockery as our saving throw based offensive spell, and much like we did with the Glamour Bard, also picking up Lesser Restoration here, because again, we are not really the ones doing a whole lot of damage. We want to make sure that our allies can get in and do what they need to do, and if they're blinded or poisoned or worse paralyzed, we can use our bonus action, because it is a bonus action now in 2024, to just tap them on the shoulder, unparalyze them, and let them get back into the action. And again, we also boosted our charisma, so our AC went up to 17 now, so we're as good as the Glamour Bard already. Let's go ahead and move on to level 5, where we get our 3rd level spells. At 3rd level, of course, we get Font of Inspiration. We get our Bardic Inspiration back on a short rest in addition to a long rest now, so that's really good. Additionally, in 2024, it also says that you can expend a spell slot to restore a use of our Bardic Inspiration. And while for the Glamour Bard, I don't think that there would be a whole lot of opportunities where you'd want to expend a spell slot to do that, because the Glamour Bard is much more about casting their spells. The College of Dance may get to a point where they do that, and by the end of this video, we might see that we might be in a situation where you have extra low-level spell slots, so that's certainly something we could consider. For our 3rd level spells, again, we don't have a lot of good ally movement options, but we do have the ability to control the enemy's movement, so we will pick up the Slow spell. I really like the Slow spell because you're able to pick out your targets. It is an area control spell that doesn't affect your allies, and again, Sending is just a good utility spell. I'll pick that one up as well, just so that someone in our party has it. Unlike the Glamour Bard, we're not going to be shy about picking up 3rd level spells. I don't remember how many I end up with ultimately, but again, we're not trying to avoid our 3rd level spell slots to be able to use one of our Bard features, so we'll be investing a little bit more heavily in our 3rd level spell slot. Moving on then to level 6, we get our level 6 feature called Inspiring Movement. This is our subclass feature, and this is sort of the second part in addition to the Dazzling Footwork of what we're trying to put together. So we can already use unarmed strikes whenever we use a Bardic Inspiration to grab an ally and move them around. Now Inspiring Movement says that when an enemy you can see ends its turn within 5 feet of you, you can take a reaction to expend use of your Bardic Inspiration to move up to half your speed. Then one ally of your choice within 30 feet of you can also use their reaction to move half of their speed as well. And then none of the movement from this feature provokes opportunity attack. So let's say that big enemy runs up to me and another ally caster. We obviously don't want that to happen. It ends its turn. I can actually then use my Bardic Inspiration to choose like a martial ally to run up to that enemy. And then I can use my unarmed strike to then grapple the caster ally next to me and then pull them away, maybe out of the opportunity attack range of that creature. So we don't need to use like the dash or disengage action or use like a Misty Step or anything to get away from the creature. So with this feature and Dazzling Footwork, we can potentially move up to 3 creatures on the same turn, provided that we have one ally within 5 feet of us when that happens. So when we're in combat, we're kind of just playing chess by moving ourselves and our allies around the battlefield in a way that is more advantageous to us. Additionally, at level 6, we get another feature called Tandem Footwork. This one says, when you roll initiative, you can expend a use of your Bardic Inspiration if you don't have the incapacitated condition. When you do so, each ally within 30 feet who can see or hear you gains a bonus to their initiative equal to 1 roll of that Bardic Inspiration die. So that's actually also very powerful. Not only are we very good at getting our allies into position more quickly, also now we can make sure that our allies are more likely to go first. But right now we're kind of in a position where we don't have a lot of good spells to move our allies around as well. A lot of this is just banking on using our Bardic Inspiration to do that. Fortunately, we are getting them back on a short rest at this time, but we might want to be taking those short rests maybe more frequently if we're trying to do this a lot. It is really going to depend on like how big the battlefields are and what kind of positions our allies get themselves in, to how often we'd actually need to use our Bardic Inspiration to get people into certain places or out of certain places. Those features aside, again, we get to choose another 3rd level spell. I'm going to again pick up Leomund's Tiny Hut. It's just a good spell to have, at least at this level. It is slightly weaker than it was in 2024, at least at higher levels, but currently at this level, it's still pretty good. We can still use it. So then moving on to level 7, we get access to our 4th level spells. We also get the Counter Charm feature, which again is a reaction to allow an ally to re-roll a failed saving throw against being charmed or frightened, and then they can make that re-roll at advantage. We're going to give up Enlarge Reduce use now in favor of polymorph. And we're also basically just going to just auto lock in Dimension Door, because that is basically the first spell that we can actually pick that actually does the thing that we are trying to do with this class, which is being able to move our allies around. It might not be something that you necessarily use in combat, but it is still a very good spell that, again, does exactly what we're trying to do with this class. And then polymorph, again, I think does a lot of the same things that we want to use Enlarge Reduce for, in terms of like allowing our allies to do a little bit more damage, allowing them to take up more space and control more area of the battlefield if we turn them into a very large creature. It is sort of like a soft heal because it gives them a bunch of temporary hit points. It just does a lot of the same work and also does more than that as well. So I think it's just a very good trade-off. Moving then on to level 8. Again, I'm just going to take the ASI for +2 to charisma at this time. I think that's just a very good choice for the bard to make sure that we have as many bardic inspirations as possible. It's also going to increase our AC as the College of Dance due to our unarmored defense. Now we're up to an 18 AC, which is pretty respectable. We get to pick up another spell at this level. I didn't really like, again, many of the options that bards have at 4th level, so I went back to 3rd level to pick up Hypnotic Pattern. We'll probably trade out some of these 3rd level spells later on, but for now I think this is a decent package. I think one thing that we could consider at 4th level is freedom of movement. However, I think we already have enough tools that allow us to do the things that freedom of movement would already be doing. Like we have lesser restoration to pop a paralysis. We have dazzling footwork and expiring movement to move creatures around a little bit better. I don't think like we feel we have as much of a need for something like freedom of movement, unless we wanted to put it on ourselves to make sure that we can move as much as we need to. That's certainly a consideration. Maybe I would go back and change that if I thought about that at the time that I was making this video, but I didn't. But I think that's certainly something you could consider. Moving on then to level 9, we get our expertise. Again, you can pick whatever you want. For our 5th level spells, we're going to start by picking up Mass Cure Wounds for some additional healing. Again, this is like 5d8 plus your spellcasting modifier. And like I said earlier, we're not picking up Mass Healing Word because we don't want to have to choose between using our Bardic Inspiration and healing on the same turn. And then we're also going to pick up the new spell in 2024 called Yolanda's Regal Presence. This one is sort of like a Spirit Guardians type effect where it's an emanation around us and it does damage when a creature enters its space for the first time or ends their turn there. If they fail the saving throw against it, they take 46 psychic damage. They have the prone condition and we can push them up to 10 feet away. On a successful save, they just take half the damage, and of course this can only trigger once per turn. While this isn't necessarily moving our allies, it does give us the ability to move our enemies when we are moving around the battlefield as well. And it is also the first spell that we've been able to pick up that weaponizes our movement, which I think is really good. I think we only really need one spell like this. I think this is a really good one to have. We're probably going to end up keeping this one for the long haul. So then finally moving on to level 10 where we get our magical secrets. Now that we have magical secrets, we're going to be able to more aggressively get the spells that we really wanted to get earlier, but we didn't have access to because they're not on the Bard spell list. So first things first, again, we're picking up Guidance for our new cantrip. We're going to trade out Hypnotic Pattern for Thunderstep because Thunderstep allows us to take an ally with us when we use Thunderstep. So again, if an ally is in a bad position, we can run up to them, grab them, and Thunderstep out of it. We don't need to use a bigger spell slot on something like Dimension Door. Then for our spell for that turn, again, we're just going to pick up Rary's Telepathic Bond. Again, I think that's just a very good spell to have in your pocket. If someone else is already bringing it, then of course we can pick up anything else. Moving on then to level 11, we get our 6th level spells, but first we're going to replace our Kinetic Jaunt spell at the 2nd level with Vortex Warp. Vortex Warp, I believe, was also from Strixhaven, much like the Silvery Barb spell. Vortex Warp, I believe, allows us to target a creature within 60 feet, 60 or 90 feet, I believe. Could be 30 feet. I can't remember the exact range on it. We can teleport that creature 30 feet. I know we already have the Spring Eladrin's Face Step where we can run up to a creature and then teleport them 30 feet, but Vortex Warp now allows us to do that at range. If we don't have the movement or don't want to expose ourselves to danger by using our movement to get up to them, we can use Vortex Warp instead. And then of course we can also just use that one on enemies if we want to try to move them into a different location. And then on that topic, for our 6th level spell, we're basically just auto-locking the Scatter spell. The Scatter spell lets you choose, I think it's up to 12 creatures within a certain radius, so allies and enemies alike, and then you can just pick wherever they go on the battlefield. So that's also just a very, very fun spell to have as well. And again, does exactly what we're trying to do with this subclass. Moving then on to level 12, we get our next feat. So this time we're again going to choose Mage Slayer. I just think this is such a good spell to pick up on any class these days. It doesn't necessarily need to be a martial class. We're going to use that to buff our dexterity up to 17. This is also again going to protect our intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws once per short rest. We can just choose to succeed when we fail. And much like we did with the Glamour Bard, again, we're going to lose Tiny Hut. We're going to trade that out for Prayer of Healing at 2nd level. And again, that's assuming that no one else is already bringing Prayer of Healing, just to give us that one extra short rest per day to get back these resources like our Bardic Inspiration, like our use of Mage Slayer, or anything else that comes back on a short rest. And that's for us as well as, 5 other allies who are in the range of casting that spell. Because we're able to basically get this 10-minute short rest rest. I think that kind of makes up for losing Tiny Hut. We aren't able to choose any new spells at this level. So then moving on to level 13, where we get our 7th level spells, we'll pick up Reverse Gravity. I do want to preface that Simulacrum I still think is the fundamentally correct choice. But, in the interest of not picking up Simulacrum every time I build a spellcaster, at level 13 or higher that has access to it, I'm just going to pick up Reverse Gravity. I think Reverse Gravity is just a great area control spell as well. Can do a lot of damage if you choose to raise them 100 feet in the air, hold them there for a few rounds, and then end the spell, and then let them fall 100 feet. There's lots of fun things that you can do with it there. And then we're also going to trade out Thunderwave, which I don't think is really doing a whole lot for us anymore, and instead pick up Disintegrate as a single target sort of burst spell. And not only is it a single target burst spell, but it also, allows us to destroy objects of force, like a wall of force, or just, any sort of structure that's in our way. If we need to just kind of blast a hole through a door that we can't otherwise get through, we can do that instead. If there is a use of Disintegrate, you can certainly find it if you want to. Moving on then to level 14, we get our subclass capstone called Leading Evasion. This basically just gives you, the bard, the evasion feature, which, when you make a dexterity save, if you fail the save, you still only take half damage, and if you make the save, then you take no damage. The extra part of this feature is that we can also give this benefit to allies within 5 feet of us who are also making the same dexterity saving throw. Usually if you're in a situation where you're going to have to be making dexterity saving throws against area of effects, ideally you just want to spread out and not, be in a situation where you can all get hit by it. That's usually the better way to go about it. However, you don't always have that choice, depending on what kind of space you have to work with. Some areas of effect are just so large, especially with like the larger like red dragons with their fire breath. They're very mobile, and that takes up a lot of space, so they can usually just find an angle to breathe on a bunch of you at the same time. So maybe in those situations it's more advantageous to actually huddle together such that you're able to at least have that damage, and if they make the save, then they also take no damage instead. In addition to that feature, we're also going to trade out our Vicious Mockery cantrip for the Mind Sliver cantrip. I just like Mind Sliver a lot better. I don't think I actually did this on the Glamour Bard, and if I didn't, I definitely should have at some point, because I know there are levels where I didn't trade anything out, and I definitely just love Mind Sliver to be able to debuff saving throws. Moving on then to level 15, we get our 8th level spells. The first thing that we're going to do is actually trade out Tasha's Hideous Laughter for Hold Monster. This hurts a little bit because we can always just upcast Tasha's Hideous Laughter to control more creatures at the same time, but we do have things like Reverse Gravity and Slow, and the upside of Hold Monster is just so much higher, of course, than Hideous Laughter. And for our 8th level spell, I'm actually kind of interested in Holy Aura here, considering we have the Leading Evasion feature. What Holy Aura is that it is a concentration spell that gives us a 30-foot emanation, and then all creatures of our choice who are within that emanation have advantage on all of their saving throws, and then creatures who make attacks against our allies within that emanation also have disadvantage on their attack rolls against them. If the attacking creatures are fiends or undead and they hit with that attack, they must make a Constitution saving throw or be blinded until the end of their next turn. So there's a lot of good things to do there, and again, it works very well with our Leading Evasion feature. When we're in a situation where we know we're going to have to make dex saves, we can pop Holy Aura and stand next to our allies that we want to protect to make sure that they have advantage on that saving throw, and if they make that saving throw, then they take no damage. Then again, moving on to level 16, we get our penultimate feat. I deliberated quite a bit over this one, but I ended on Defensive Duelist. At the end of the day, we wanted to pick one that would give us a +1 to our dexterity at least, and while a +2 to dexterity would allow us to get to 20 dexterity if we used our epic boon to buff our dexterity and have an AC of 20, I just think the ability to have like a pseudo shield type effect on a melee attack is going to do a lot more for us in the long run than just having an extra +1 AC all the time would. Another thing I was considering was just picking up the Grappler feat so that we didn't have to spend extra movement when grabbing our allies and moving them around. However, the other benefits of Grappler don't really help us as the College of Dance Bard. I didn't really feel like it was worth it just to get the +1 to dex and to have that no spending extra movement while grappling. Especially considering we have so many other features like the Inspiring Movement and the Dazzling Footwork in general, or Vortex Warp, or the Spring Eladrin's Face Step to teleport creatures, Scatter. We have so many ways to move our allies around. The Grappler feat is just really sort of too extra for me. The only other thing I would have considered is the Speedy feat, which is the revised mobile feat in 2024. It gives us 10 extra movement. It gives creatures disadvantage on opportunity attacks against us, and I think it makes it so that when we take the dash action, we are not hampered by difficult terrain. That is certainly an option, but for shoring up our defenses, I think Defensive Duelist is it. And if we're in a situation where we need to worry about being able to use our spellcasting focus, we can make sure that we're proficient in a one-handed instrument like a pan flute or something that we can easily hold with one hand and then hold a dagger or some finesse weapon in our other hand. So then let's move on to level 17, where we get our level 9 spells. So we're actually going to pick up Mass Heal here. I was essentially debating between Mass Polymorph and Mass Heal. Both of them kind of do the same thing in the sense that they give your party a second wind. Polymorph, of course, would give all your allies a bunch of new temporary hit points and give them a very powerful creature stats like a T-Rex or whatever. But Mass Heal, again, 700 hit points distributed among your allies is going to be basically the same effect. Plus it can remove a bunch of different statuses as well. So I like that one a lot. Because we have Mass Cure Wounds and Mass Heal, I think we can kind of just drop Cure Wounds. And then I'm going to trade that out for Absorb Elements just for the ability to shore up again our defenses a little bit more. We do have the leading evasion to have evasion, but not all spells that deal damage are dexterity saves, of course. We want the ability to absorb damage of like a Cone of Cold, which is a con save or anything along those lines. At this point, we can again start getting spells at every level. So let's go ahead and move on to level 18. Of course, we get our Superior Inspiration. This means that we get at least 2 Bardic Inspiration die back when we roll initiative, provided that we have less than 2. We will again just pick up the Wish spell. Again, I just think that is the correct choice if you have access to Wish. I don't think it should be the first 9th level spell that you get, but I do think that should be a 9th level spell that you have, even if you're only using it to cast a spell of 8th level or lower. When I was thinking about this particular one, I didn't actually auto-lock Wish. I was looking at things like Plane Shift or Reincarnation or Resurrection, Teleport, things like that. But at the end of the day, I was just like, I can just pick Wish and have access to all of those things when I need to. It does use my 9th level spell slot for the day, but I think that's a fair trade to have access to any of those spells whenever I need them. So then moving on to level 19, we get our Epic Boon. I'm actually going to pick up the Boon of Speed here. This is going to give us an extra 30 foot of movement, so we go from 30 feet of speed to 60 feet of speed. This is effectively giving us the same benefit that we would have gotten from the Grappler feat by essentially allowing us to move twice as far when we have a creature grappled. We don't have any odd stats right now, so we will take that +1 from the ability score increase and give that to our charisma. Just in case we get a chance to buff any stat by 1 again, we obviously want to put that in our charisma more than our dexterity. And then for our spell selection here, I'm actually just going to go back to 6th level. I'm going to pick up Chain Lightning. I noticed we didn't really have any big damaging AoE spells aside maybe Reverse Gravity by lifting them up and then dropping them. So I wanted to go back and pick up Chain Lightning. Any AoE spell of any level I think would be fine here, whatever you'd want to choose, but I just like Chain Lightning because much like Slow, you can pick the targets that you want it to go through. It also upcasts very well for additional targets, so it's just a very good spell in general. And then finally, finishing off with level 20, of course, we get Words of Creation. This is going to give us Power Word Kill and Power Word Heal automatically prepared, and then that also allows us when we cast those spells to target an additional creature within 10 feet of the original if we choose to. And then for our final spell, we'll just pick up Befuddlement at level 8 for some additional control against spellcasters and things like that. We're not going to be using Holy Aura all the time, so I think I wanted to pick up something there at level 8. And that's my College of Dance Bard. I will say it was kind of slow going up until level 10 when we got Magical Secrets and we could start getting things like Vortex Warp and Thunderstep and all these other spells that I wanted to get like Scatter. So this might be a sign that if I ever really were going to play a College of Dance Bard, it would probably need to be in like a campaign or adventure or one shot where we're starting at 10th level or higher, that I can start picking up all those spells and kind of doing the thing that I want to do. Though I do think because we chose the Spring Eladrin and because we have the Dazzling Footwork as well as the Inspiring Movement, as soon as we hit level 6, I think we have enough like different movement options that we're kind of online. We just don't have the extra spell support that we really wanted until we get to like levels 10 and 11 when we can start switching out those earlier spells. Arguably, we're probably a little light on first level spells here, and both of our first level spells are reactions and very situational reactions. But again, remember that Font of Inspiration 2024 allows us to burn a spell slot to restore a use of our Bardic Inspiration. So outside of Absorb Elements and Featherfall, that's probably going to be a lot of what we're using our first level spells for. One thing that actually surprises me about the end of this spell list is that I have no like filler spells like I did on the Glamour Bard, where I was like, you can kind of pick anything here and nothing really stands out to me. On this one, I really ended up picking just spells at every level that I actually liked and that I felt like kind of filled certain gaps. I would have expected, because of the sort of very specific direction that the Glamour Bard wants to go in, that I would have been able to pick more concrete spells at every level. But again, we did kind of get to a point where it's like we have enough enchantment and illusion spells that I don't really feel like I need to pick enchantment and illusion spells at every level now, that we can kind of pick anything. Maybe that's the reason I kind of felt lost in there. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the spell list by the end. And again, this is just a bard that I would be willing to play. And again, I do think that there is room to move certain spells around, like if someone's already bringing Prayer of Healing or Lesser Restoration or any of these sort of like Rarish Telepathic Bond, any of our very utility spells where not everyone needs to have it, then of course we can trade those out for other things. But I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys think about what we made here. For a dance bard that is built around trying to get allies into position, how did we do? What other choices maybe we have made? What other spells do you think maybe could help? I don't think that there are a whole lot of them that we didn't pick up, but there might be some that I overlooked. So I'd love to know all that and more down in the comments down below. And again, while you're going down to those comments, please hit that like button. If you are a new viewer or returning viewer to this channel and you like what you saw here and you want to see more from me, please consider hitting that subscribe button and support the channel. I release videos every Wednesday and Sunday, so you always have something to look forward to. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.